And We Shall Purify by Parsons A.J. Chapter 4. Breaking News, or You Thought Losing Your ID Was Bad. This morning brings us some startling reports. There was chaos at Garfield High School yesterday evening when an unprompted terrorist attack put students in the hospital and their parents in a panic. It was 2 p.m. at Garfield High School Wednesday evening when a pep rally took an alarming turn. A woman believed to be an esteemed guest speaker revealed herself to be an imposter. Multiple assailants were present in the room and began to attack the student population. There were 8 injuries before the police arrived on scene to find the school in pandemonium. Investigators have yet to discover the reason for the attack, or what the assailants had hoped to achieve. It can certainly be said, though, that students will be returning to school tomorrow with a new sense of uncertainty. Our news team will keep you up to date on any developments. In other news, the ARC team at NASA is taking on an unexpected new job, tracking down the wandering planets of the former HR 8832, where the star had abruptly disappeared. Terrible. Rory peered back to where her mama was placing pancakes on the table, eyes affixed to the scene on the screen. To think those hoodlums would target a room full of school children. Just terrible. Mama's eyes dropped back down to Rory, where she was sitting at the table. You sure you don't want to stay home from school today, baby? It was Friday. The school had closed down Thursday because no one wanted their kids there after a supposed terrorist attack, and the investigation was still in progress. Knowing the truth, it had been sort of excruciating to wait around while she could have been free-running or just doing her dang job. Brenda had been understanding, bless that woman. Across the table, Tyrell stiffly finished his plate, kissing their mom on the cheek before heading out the door. I've got to go. Bye, Mama. Be careful. Rory took the pancakes, swirling her fork in the plate of butter. I'm sure, Mama. How else are we going to show these guys that they can't get to us than by getting back to business? Her mama smiled, worry lining all of her features. That's my girl. Narma had ended up in the hospital. They quickly realized willpower wasn't going to take care of her broken rib, and Rory had to call a taxi to take them in. Rory just needed some disinfectant and a bandage, but Narma had to get her torso wrapped. Luckily, her parents didn't hear the news until after they'd wrapped up, so they didn't see the handprints. They would have taken a lot more explaining. Right now, Mama and Narma's parents were simply put under the impression that they'd sustained their injuries in the attack. Rory brushed a hand over the bandage under her shirt. At least, at the end of the day, they were both all right. But it had gotten nasty. Well, at least they didn't have to deal with the Pythos anymore. At the outskirts of the city, 2 men took in the skyline from the mountain. It was a shame, really, this glistening planet, the endless possibilities of these creatures, and they used their brilliance to destroy it. There was only one way to salvage this world now. Of course, its time had not yet come. For now, they had a much rawer beauty to harness. What a disgrace! Lepido turned, watching Festosis throw a handful of dirt from the crest of the tree. Festosis turned to him, his wild hair pushed back by the air of the higher altitude. Dissidia, what a waste of space. Did you hear? She had 2 star souls in her grasp, and she let them escape us. Lepido couldn't stop the smirk that twitched onto his face. What would you wish her further? She's already reduced to dust. Festosis sneered. Picking up a stray pebble off the tree, he hurled it into the air before them. It is merely embarrassing, brother. Sister Dissidia was not worthy to join our cause in the first place. It's a relief to see her gone. Eyeing Lepido, he slowly smiled. Hey, would you indulge me in a wager? Oh, and here he went. Festosis would never pass up the opportunity for a bet. He always believed he was going to win. And what wager is this? Festos' gaze sharpened. I bet I can acquire both star souls before you can. A test of skill. What do you say? Lupido considered the other agent. Fast had always had a brashness Lou found unsavory. It was an interesting proposal, and perhaps allowing Festos to trip over himself trying to hunt both star souls at once might be to his benefit. What is the prize? The other agent grinned. Bragging rights, of course. He paused, his smile turning sly, and the loser owes the winner a favor. A favor? Lupido suddenly took in the other agent's form. Fit? A handsome face? His lip twitched. He certainly wouldn't mind wiping that smug expression off of it. Festos probably planned to have him grovel at his feet. He should be more careful not to put himself in situations he couldn't handle. Lupido flared a wrist out. I accept. After all, Fast had no concept of how to truly take hold of one's desires. You had to savor it, take it slow, pull it apart until the only thing left to do is wait until it falls into your hands. How could one achieve purity if they remained unfulfilled? There was more than one way to make someone grovel. He was going to lose. Rory knew something was off when she got into the cafeteria that afternoon, and the whole room was whispering. And it wasn't the kind of whispering where you really didn't want anyone to hear you. It was distinctly the sound of gossip. Rory was wondering what she wasn't in on when Narma charged up to her lunch table and slammed a skein of paper down in front of her. She whispered, but didn't whisper. Look at this! The paper was headed with the Garfield Times. The school newspaper? That's right, Eddie did say something was coming out today. But then she saw what was on the cover. It was a sketch. Framed facing upward, a black line that seemed to be the edge of a rooftop and a colorless evening sky. Against the sky, dark and distinct as a Rorschach blotch, a silhouette. Her silhouette. Or rather, the silhouette of Sailor Beta. The headline read, "A superhero for Seattle?" Narma stared at her. She whispered, "Isn't that crazy?" Her expression said, "What the hell do we do?" Rory took the paper. It looked like Eddie did remember something from his time as a Pithos, though the story he told wasn't exactly accurate. According to the article, he was walking home from the post office when a monster appeared. He'd seen it flee to the rooftop and then seen a skirted figure take it down. Well, he couldn't exactly tell them he was the monster, could he? Her stomach dropped as an amendment from the article brought in the circumstances surrounding the pep rally, citing student accounts of 2 women in uniform. She underestimated Eddie. He'd seen a lot, and he wanted everyone to know about it. She gestured for Narma to sit down at the table, and Rory shrugged off her jacket. It was real stuffy all of a sudden. What are people saying? Anyone believe this? Narma tapped her nails in a staccato on the table. People saw it, all of them. Some think it was a joke, but most want to believe. A lot of the cheerleaders saw things that day they couldn't explain, and those girls have clout. Rory smoothed out the paper. Well, it is just a school newspaper, right? They were bound to get excited about it. Just like a Sailor Moon. Narma bit her lip. Maybe. She adjusted her scarf. Rory frowned across the table at Narma, lowering her voice as someone squeezed in beside her. Oh, sorry. Hey, we just need to be careful. She peered around, paranoid now. Man, she had never been the type to care if some stranger was listening. Guess it was time to start. Hey, I talked to Celine about that thing. You know, we might be able to start training soon. The cat had been looking around, and finally she said she found a good place for them to practice. Rory just needed to scope it out. She just hoped the cat had thought it over and didn't pick somewhere a wandering black girl might get hounded by the police for going. She wasn't sure how much Celine actually knew about humans and the world that they lived in. Narma unpacked her naan from her lunch bag, ripping into it with unnecessary force when she pulled out her Tupperware of Sahi paneer. Hopefully we won't have to. Girl, you saw that woman turn into dust. I don't think we'll be seeing her again. Everywhere Rory went for the rest of the day, the paper haunted her. In every class, it seemed at least 2 people were reading the article. News was spreading. Behind her, she heard a passing conversation. Yeah, I asked her, but she said she couldn't do it. Like, immediately. She didn't even think about it. I swear, she probably thinks she's too pretty to be working with the rest of us peasants. Right? I don't know what the hell Carmen's problem is. Well, at least the paper wasn't the only point of gossip going on. She took a breath and pulled the last few items out of her locker. It was just as she told Narma. It wasn't as though anyone was going to recognize them in uniform, so she just had to make sure no one saw them transform. She was just glad she didn't have to work that evening. She wasn't feeling up to free running that day, but at least she could stop through the yarn barn before they shut down. Something occurring to her, Rory peered over her collection of items to take home. Didn't I bring my jacket today? Realization struck her. I never picked it back up when I took it off at lunch. Her heart leapt. The beta scepter was in there. She hurried back to the lunchroom, relief flowing through her when she spied the bright purple jacket on the lunch bench. Oh, thank God. Celine would have killed me. Relief slowly melted into confusion when, getting closer, she noticed Velcro straps on the jacket and a pattern detail inside the pocket. This isn't my jacket. It must be that other girl's. She froze, which means that chick has my jacket. Grabbing the leftover jacket, Rory hefted her backpack over her shoulder and darted to the school's entrance. It was a pretty bright color. Maybe I can spot her? What did she look like? She remembered long, dark hair. Bursting through the double door, she scanned the steps from the street. Come on, come on! Any second, that girl might reach into her pocket and find the scepter. They'd all seen it in the newspaper. They all knew about Sailor Moon. She had to catch up with her. There. Rory just caught a glimpse of purple turn the corner. She took off, backpack thumping painfully against her injured shoulder. She couldn't let anyone see the scepter. Even if they didn't know what it was, they would know something was up. She ran. Once around the corner, Rory could see the girl at the end of the block. The shadows of trees flew by her as she sprinted down the street. The girl was still walking. Could she call out to her? But no, she was too far away. Dang it. The girl stopped. Rory almost let herself slow down, but then she saw the bus stop sign the girl stood beside, and the bus chugging up the road. Rory held a hand out as the bus came to a stop, the girl leading on. Wait! They didn't hear her. As she got halfway up the street, the bus took off again, speeding right past her. Rory threw her hands down, spiraling in place. Stopping, she eyed the destination sign. Five Place, downtown. Could she free run down there? Dang, no, it didn't matter. She would never keep up with the bus. That girl would be lost to the ether before she even made it down there. She watched the bus drive away, nearing a stoplight. Maybe... A plan forming, she turned and darted back down the street. Come on, Rory, you can do it. It was never the wrong time for a pep talk. Apparently somebody up there liked her because the bus slowed to a stop at the light, right next to a corner store beside the school. She leaped as she neared the store. Snagging a hand up, she pulled herself up to the roof. She was glad it was high enough to be out of line of sight for the bus goers. Taking a step back from the edge of the roof, she launched forward, crouching to land on top of the bus. The bus gave a thud as she landed. She hoped no one bothered to check the roof. Carefully, she laid down flat, waiting to ride out the trip. She needed to keep an eye out during any stops. The stoplight changed and the bus chugged on. Rory blew out a breath, watching the sky pass above her. It was blue, but dimming, evening setting in. In a distant corner, she could see the vague shape of the moon. Sailor Moon had always seemed like a superhero, even back when Rory thought she was fake. Did she have to go through things like this? If all the news stories were true, if she dealt with as many threats to Japan as they publicized, she had to be exhausted. How did she do it? I'd like to meet her one day. After 30 minutes and the girl with the scepter never exiting the bus, they reached Pike Place. Pike was an elaborate market full of shops, ice cream parlors, farmer stands, and neon lighting as the city began to darken. Rory watched the girl disembark from the bus top, dropping down behind it to follow her on the street. At least Sailor Moon wasn't a stalker. Ahead, the girl entered a shop called Gem Heaven. Thank goodness she was going to catch her. Well, that looked dangerous. Rory stopped, glancing back to where the voice had come from behind her. There was a guy standing there. His broad shoulders were squeezed into a long-sleeve, patterned shirt, the kind of pattern that felt like it meant something. His dark hair was pulled slickly back into a ponytail, stubble over his square jaw. He smiled, teeth as bright and striking as his eyes, a clear blue. But you look like the kind of girl who enjoys taking risks. Whoa. Rory swallowed, straightening. This guy had a look, but no way was he in high school. Did he go to Seattle U? Yeah, I guess so. You know, you do what you gotta do when you miss the bus. She chuckled nervously. Watch yourself, Rory. A guy that good-looking has gotta be trouble. Her eyes darted back to the shop. She couldn't lose track of that girl. He regarded her. The guy had an intense gaze. You seem distracted. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother you when you're busy. His grin slowly spread. I was just curious. You don't see someone leap from the top of a bus every day. The guy was smooth as heck. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Then again, most people would probably bust their kneecaps. I don't recommend it. I just have a lot of practice. The guy tilted his head back. Yes, most people. He pulled his hands out of his pockets. You're an interesting girl, miss. He held a hand out. It took her a second to realize he was asking her name. Aurora. Rory. I go by Rory. She took his hand, periphery hyper-aware of the door to Gem Heaven. They shook. Rory. I'm Lucas. Mercifully, he released her hand, beginning to walk backwards away from her. Maybe we'll see each other again sometime. He grinned once more before turning and continuing down the street. Yeah, maybe, she said weakly, watching him go. Fudge, the girl! Turning, she darted into Gem Heaven, scanning the room for any purple jackets. Peering around to every corner of the room, she didn't see anyone. She turned to the shop owner. Did you see a girl in a purple jacket come through here? The woman at the desk looked shifty, drumming her nails on the table. No, I don't believe so, dear. Rory narrowed her eyes. She was sure the girl hadn't come back out the door. She watched the woman's gaze dart towards the back. Hey, there was another exit back there. Thanks, she called instinctively before darting for the back exit. She emerged into Back Street. Her eyes scanned the area. Oh, wow, she'd really almost lost her. Faintly in the distance, she could make out a purple shape moving up Pike Street. Already out of breath, she took off. Man, she thought she was going to have downtime after school. So much for that. That girl must have figured out she was following her if she'd taken the back exit. Rory pumped her arms, still running as the girl turned down first. This was going to be a lot harder if this girl was actively trying to avoid her. She pushed herself faster. She could see threads of sunset bursting in above them in the horizon. Narrowing her eyes, she identified the girl's trajectory. She was headed for the museum. There must have been something different physically in doing free running and running through the streets. Her stomach was starting to hurt. It was a good thing the museum had free entry to students. As she entered, Rory flashed her student ID and continued inside, the counter clerk calling, "No running!" behind her. It had been a while since she'd been in the museum. It was almost overwhelmingly quiet, not even any music playing on the intercom. People meandered through the building, casually taking in the paintings hung on white walls. Rory's gaze passed through the different lower rooms visible from the entryway. I don't see her. Her attention turned to the staircase. She must have gone upstairs. Jumping up the steps, Rory brushed past the patrons, rounding the stair-top rails. She turned to search the next room when she found herself staring at a girl in a purple jacket. She was behind the railing opposite her. The girl grimaced when she saw her. Rory didn't know her name, but she recognized her. They had been in an art class together in middle school. She turned and fled down the hallway into the next gallery. Dang. The lights went out. People screamed. The darkness coincided with an enormous crashing noise from above, as if something had fallen down on top of the museum's roof. The sound sent Rory to the ground, covering her head as the many other patrons around her did the same. She glanced behind her, the girl no longer visible. No, come on. She began to get up but dropped down again with the noise duplicated. This time, loosened shards rained down from the skylight. A museum worker trudged up the steps. Remain calm, people. We're going to find the source of the outage, and the building should restore power in just a few minutes. Something came through the skylight. Rory shielded her eyes as glass fell around her, something landing heavily on the staircase. She heard the telltale noise of the employee falling back down the steps. Mainly the massive smoke engulfing his head like some kind of hair, and the massive shadowy jaw overlaying his own mouth. It was quiet for only a moment before the creature, who also had claws, apparently, great, opened its mouth, letting loose a ground-shaking roar. The museum goers scattered in every direction. Anywhere to get away from the staircase. Rory scrambled backwards, stray glass cutting into her hands as she struggled to get out of the monster's line of sight. Okay, that was definitely a Pythos. A different Pythos. Her hand rose to her pocket, even though she knew what she would find there. Nothing. The scepter was in that jacket. The creature turned and Rory scrambled up, trying to move down the hallway, but the girl had disappeared. She needed that scepter now. How was she supposed to defeat the Pythos without it? She moved forward, almost going into the next gallery before realizing there was glass all over the floor. In the far corner, she spied a second Pythos, stomping around in the direction of any girls it spotted. That made sense, though. Apparently, sailor soldiers were almost exclusively women. They were on the hunt. Rory panted, backing into the hall. Behind her, there was a door. This place had conference rooms. This had to be one of them. Quickly moving inside, she shut the door behind her. She turned, leaning back against the door. She had to come up with a plan. She froze when she found a familiar purple jacket on the floor in front of her, at the far end of the small conference room. She let herself breathe. The girl must have ditched it when she realized it was how Rory was spotting her so easily. Well, she didn't have to worry about her following her anymore. Rory knelt to the floor, fishing into the pocket, relief sweeping through her when her hand closed around the rod of the scepter. The door opened and closed. Rory froze. Slowly looking up, she met the startled gaze of the girl she'd been chasing. She was plastered against the door, in the same position Rory had been just a second ago. Nobody moved. The girl stared from the door, and Rory's hand was clutching the scepter, in full view of God and everyone. They looked at each other, both out of breath. Slowly, Rory held her hands over her head. The girl's eyes locked on the scepter, confusion flashing in her eyes. Stomps and screaming resounded from the halls outside. "You took my jacket by mistake." The girl looked confused, then understanding when Rory carefully stripped off the jacket she was wearing, tossing it over. "That's yours." The girl took a breath. Rory tried to remember her name. Something like Lena or Lisa, last name like Wynn. She said, I didn't realize. Her eyes were locked on the scepter, though, like she knew what it was. What is that? Rory didn't answer. Not directly, at least. The less she could get out of telling, the better. It doesn't matter. You saw those monsters out there, right? Lena? No, Lisa, she was pretty sure, nodded. Yeah, like in the newspaper. Lisa's head whipped to the side as a particularly loud crash sounded from outside. Rory winced. Dang, Eddie, why'd you have to make this so difficult? Yeah. Rory raised the scepter. Now, Lisa. The girl nodded. I need to get out there. She had to be super careful here. Lisa could blow everything open. I can take out the monsters. But you gotta promise me you'll never tell anyone what you saw, okay? Maybe she could reason with her. Might as well try. It was the only chance she had. If anyone knows anything like you're about to know, I can't stop the monsters anymore. Okay? Lisa stared at the scepter. Finally, she nodded. Swear, Rory shot out. I mean it, girl, nobody. Lisa swallowed. I swear. Rory sighed. Thanks. Now, you probably want to shield your eyes. She thrust the scepter in the air. Crystal power beta, make up! Light like darkness. A tingling sensation wrapped over her limbs, an audible note ringing in the air. And then she wasn't Rory anymore. Lisa uncovered her eyes, flinching against the door when the girl she'd been in the room with was suddenly unrecognizable. Sailor Beta approached the door, flexing her fingers. Lisa moved as she approached, staring openly. You should probably stay in here. And then claws pierced the door and ruined that plan. Shit! Rory grabbed Lisa, shoving her behind her as the Pithos ripped the door off its hinges. Star Soul detected, it growled. Lisa screaming as it ripped a chunk of the wall away. Come on, then! Sailor Beta took her chance. Darting under the Pithos' beefed-up limb, this thing was tricked out, what the hell? Thankfully, the beast followed her. Sailor Beta sprinted into the open gallery. It seemed people had gotten smart and hid while the things were distracted, though Rory could still spy a few stray folks cornered here and there. Well? She cried as the lion-like Pithos stomped towards her. Bring it! The Pithos charged. Its maw gaped open to reveal the clenched jaw of the guy it had taken hold of. How did that happen? There was no time to ponder, though. The Pithos sucked in a deep breath. Rory planted her feet, and settled when the inhalation was strong enough to move her, and roared. The building shook, and the air came out as a blast that slammed into her, knocking her back into one of the museum's pillars. Rory gasped, trying to get back the air that had been knocked out of her. From the floor, she called out, Dire stellar gust! The windstorm knocked into the first Pithos, but Rory's heart stuttered when he shook off the attack without apparent injury. Her eyes widened. Maybe she was a bit in over her head here. Where was Celine when she needed her? Creep number 2 was right behind the first, eager to get in on the party. Sailor Beta rolled out of the way, mind frantically searching for a strategy. She leapt back up, flipping onto the stairs railing. But the Pithos were unrelenting, flanking her like the guardians of a library step. She eyed the rail beneath her. She couldn't stay up here. They could slash through this thing in a second. One got behind, ready to snatch her off her roost. The other got ready for another roar. She was screwed over either way she went. She quickly examined their positions. Unless... The one in front roared, the one behind's claws closing in. Quickly, Sailor Beta leapt across to the opposite rail. The first Pithos' attack connected with the second, blasting it into the back wall. As hoped, the smoke burst off the second figure like a cloud of dust. The first Pithos smashed through the railing. Rory's eyes widened as she scrambled back into the hall. Oh, he's mad now. The Pithos sucked in a breath, the next roar tossing her effortlessly down the hall. She caught herself, grounding her boots and gloves into the flooring. In the doorway to the first gallery, the Pythos loomed, taking up the whole entryway. Just you and me, big guy. What now, though? This thing was so huge, Dire Gus didn't seem to touch him. Or the thought struck her as he opened his mouth again. Not from the outside. As he sucked in air again, she quickly thrust out the Beta Scepter. Dire Stellar Gust! The Pythos breathed the starry wind and all its shards right in. Immediately, it began thrashing, throwing itself against the wall. Rory laughed, wiping sweat from her brow. Yeah, suck on that! The smoke burst away from him, shredded. Rory leaned back against the wall, exhausted. Not bad if she did say so herself. She sighed. She still had to walk home. And go to Yarn Barn. She re-entered the destroyed conference room. Lisa sat in the corner, watching. Rory's coat was on the floor. Rory considered the object for a moment. The door to the conference room was completely missing, the room gaping open into the hall. She couldn't transform back here, which meant she couldn't take the jacket. Rory threw a hand out towards it. Keep it, she said. Lisa stood. She said, What? How is that possible? She gestured to the uniform of Sailor Beta, the wand. Rory eyed her. Girl, you know I can't tell you. She pursed her lips. See you at school. Rory left through the front door of the museum in full uniform. Maybe she could find the nearest rooftop. Or maybe the back alley of Yarn Barn. It was starting to rain. From atop the building across from her, Lupido watched her leave with interest. Festosis had to be joking if he thought such mindless attacks would be a match for a sailor soldier. So inelegant. The man had no idea how to break a heart. Once home, Rory quietly closed the door behind her. The house was quiet. Under the jittery lights of the kitchen, Rory noticed a note on the countertop. Dropping her backpack to the floor, she looked at the note. Have to work late, honey. Fixed you a tub of HH. Tyrell's off again. Love you. Taking the Tupperware of microwaved hamburger helper back to her room, she pulled out her homework, her phone, and her latest project. Almost immediately, she heard scratching at her window. Celine. She moved over to let her in, before going to sit down. What happened? Celine shrieked. I felt a disturbance, but I couldn't find you. Celine patted over before leaping onto the bed. Those things are still coming, Rory said flatly. I had a really long day. Concern on her face, Celine quieted down, curling up on the bed beside her. Appreciating that she wasn't going to press, Rory scratched her behind the ear. She opened the bag from Yarn Barn, pulling out the yarn and the scepter she'd hidden away. She smoothed out her project. The scarf was almost done, but she needed some time to disengage. Flopping back onto the bed, she typed out a quick message to Narma. Bad news. Somebody knows. What? Aurora West, you had one job. Well, shit, I got more bad news. What's that? My parents saw the bruises. That was Chapter 4 of And We Shall Purify by Parsons A.J. The link to the fic is in the description. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe for more content of a similar nature. Thank you for watching. And until next time, farewell to all of you lovely folks out there in the ether. Bye-bye.